What I designed myself into was a plug that fit the socket of rugby on the field. So anywhere that wasn't on that field, I couldn't plug in. At home, I'd be thinking about the next game. After the game, I'd be thinking about this game. If I'm trying to eat a meal, I'd be half thinking about this. But as soon as I went onto the rugby field, that first whistle went, who I'd become fit that socket. You plug in and suddenly you talk about being in the zone and effortless. But as soon as the referee blows his whistle and says penalty, suddenly I'm like, now it's about me. So the way I articulate that self-importance is the thought, what about me? Now, as soon as you see a referee give a penalty, you look at a kicker. Moments before, they're playing the game and they're just effortless. As soon as suddenly the referee blows the whistle, you see them change. They go, and you're like, well, hold on, just be as you were. Why? Because the thought, what about me, comes in. And it may be, what if I miss this? But it ultimately reduces down to, what about me if I miss this? Take away the thought, what about me? Where's pressure? Take away the thought, what happens if this goes wrong? Where's fear of failure? And it just comes down to self-importance.
Jonny Wilkinson was never known as a man who enjoyed conflict. He rarely shouted, rarely celebrated with arrogance, rarely gave the media a controversial headline. To millions of rugby fans, he was the quiet perfectionist, the calm face behind England's greatest sporting triumph, the player who looked more comfortable apologizing after a tackle than talking about himself. But rugby has never cared how polite you are. The game has a brutal way of exposing every weakness. It forces respect through pain, not reputation. Every great career leaves behind broken bodies, broken expectations, and a handful of names that are impossible to forget. For Wilkinson, those names were never just opponents. They were the men who hit him harder than anyone else. The men who ruined perfect afternoons. The men who forced him to question whether talent alone was enough. Some stood across from him wearing another jersey. Others stood beside him demanding standards that seemed almost impossible to reach. Every collision left something behind. A scar. A memory. A lesson that stayed long after the stadium lights had gone dark. People often remember Jonny Wilkinson for one kick. The drop goal that won England the Rugby World Cup in 2003 became one of the greatest moments in sporting history. It turned him into a national hero overnight. What most people forget is everything that came before it. Years of relentless tackles. Opponents who hunted him because they knew stopping Wilkinson meant stopping England. Captains who tested his confidence. Players who refused to let him breathe for even a second. And coaches whose expectations weighed almost as heavily as the defenders crashing into him. He rarely spoke about hatred. That simply was not his personality. But every legendary career has its defining rivalries. Every champion carries memories of the people who pushed him closest to breaking point. Some earned his respect, others earned something much colder. Tonight we look back at 5 people who brought out the hardest battles of Jonny Wilkinson's career. Some challenged his body, some challenged his mind. All of them changed the man who would eventually become one of rugby's greatest icons. Number 5. Lawrence Dallaglio. Lawrence Dallaglio was never the kind of teammate who made life comfortable. He believed pressure created champions. If someone could not handle demanding standards on the training field, they would never survive 80 minutes wearing an England jersey. That philosophy made him one of the country's greatest captains. It also made him one of the hardest men Jonny Wilkinson ever had to play alongside. When Wilkinson first established himself as England's fly-half, he entered a dressing room filled with experienced internationals who had already earned their reputations. Dallaglio was one of the loudest voices in that room. He expected discipline in every drill, every pass, every decision. Excuses were worthless. Talent alone meant nothing. Wilkinson was already his own toughest critic. Dallaglio only raised the bar even higher. Training with England often felt almost as demanding as playing a test match. Every mistake was noticed. Every missed tackle or poor kick was questioned immediately. The senior players demanded perfection because they believed England had the talent to become the best team in the world. There was no room for passengers. For Wilkinson, whose obsessive pursuit of perfection was already pushing him mentally, that environment became another relentless battle. He spent countless hours practicing after sessions had ended, desperate to eliminate every weakness before someone else pointed it out first. The pressure did not come from insults. It came from expectations that never seemed to disappear. There were moments when the weight became almost overwhelming. Every performance felt like another examination. Every training session felt like another opportunity to prove he belonged among leaders who had already conquered the international stage. Looking back, Wilkinson would eventually acknowledge how much those standards helped shape him, but at the time, it was exhausting. Playing beside Lawrence Dallaglio meant there was nowhere to hide, not even from yourself. Sometimes the hardest opponent is the one wearing the same jersey. Number 4. Matt Dawson. Matt Dawson and Jonny Wilkinson wore the same white jersey, chased the same trophies, and celebrated many of the same victories. Yet they could hardly have been more different. Dawson thrived on emotion. He loved the spotlight, enjoyed the cameras, and never hesitated to speak his mind. Wilkinson was the complete opposite: quiet, reserved, obsessed with preparation. He preferred another hour on the training pitch over another interview. Those different personalities occasionally created friction inside England's most successful generation. As scrum half Dawson controlled the tempo around every breakdown, Wilkinson, wearing number 10, directed everything that happened next. Every attack depended on complete trust between them. Every hesitation could cost England possession. Every misunderstanding became visible to thousands inside the stadium. There were matches when Dawson wanted the game played with instinct, moving the ball before the defense had settled. Wilkinson often preferred structure, believing precision would eventually create the opening. Neither philosophy was wrong. But in international rugby, even a split second of disagreement could turn into a wasted opportunity. The media noticed those differences almost as quickly as the supporters did. Every difficult performance sparked new questions. Was England playing too conservatively? Was Wilkinson controlling too much? Was Dawson taking too many risks? Newspapers loved comparing the two men, turning normal tactical debates into stories about tension inside the squad. For Wilkinson, those headlines became another burden to carry. He had never wanted to become the center of off-field drama, yet his partnership with Dawson was constantly being analyzed from every possible angle. Still, whenever England faced their biggest tests, both men understood what mattered most. Winning came before personality. Trust came before ego. The disagreements never became larger than the team itself, but they revealed just how difficult it was to build a championship side filled with strong minds and different ideas. For Jonny Wilkinson, not every battle was fought against the opposition. Some of the toughest ones came from learning how to win alongside people who saw the game differently. Number 3. Richie McCaw. If there was one opponent who refused to give Jonny Wilkinson a moment of peace, it was Richie McCaw. He did not need to score spectacular tries. He did not need to deliver the biggest tackle of the afternoon. He simply made life miserable for every fly-half who stood across from him. By the time McCaw became captain of New Zealand, he had already built a reputation as the smartest forward in world rugby. He seemed to know where the ball would arrive before anyone else. Every breakdown became his territory. Every second of hesitation became another chance to steal possession or slow the attack. For Wilkinson, that was a nightmare. England's entire attacking system depended on quick ball. Give Wilkinson an extra second, and he could change a match with one pass or one perfectly weighted kick. Take that second away, and even the world's best fly-half could look ordinary. McCaw understood that better than anyone. He hunted every breakdown with relentless discipline. Sometimes he won the turnover. Sometimes he simply delayed the recycle long enough to destroy England's rhythm. It was subtle, calculated, and incredibly effective. By the time Wilkinson received the ball, the All Blacks' defensive line was already charging toward him. The collisions came again and again. Wilkinson rarely had the luxury of standing comfortably in the pocket. Every clearance kick arrived with black jerseys flying toward him. Every pass carried the threat of another crushing hit. There was no opportunity to relax. Against New Zealand, every phase demanded absolute concentration. What made McCaw even more frustrating was his composure. He almost never reacted to provocation. He never appeared rushed. While opponents argued with referees or complained about decisions, McCaw simply moved on to the next contest. That calmness only added to his control over the match. Wilkinson never needed to exchange angry words with Richie McCaw to understand what he was facing. Every meeting between England and New Zealand became another exhausting examination against a player who seemed determined to take away the very thing Wilkinson valued most: time. Some rivals beat you with power. Richie McCaw beat you by taking away every chance to breathe. Number 2. Brian O'Driscoll. Brian O'Driscoll never needed intimidation to change a match. He did it with intelligence. Every movement looked effortless. Every sidestep appeared simple. Yet by the final whistle, defenders were left wondering how they had been beaten so many times. For Jonny Wilkinson, O'Driscoll became one of the most frustrating opponents of the Six Nations era because he could dismantle a game plan without ever looking rushed. England and Ireland carried one of rugby's oldest rivalries, and every meeting came loaded with expectation. Wilkinson was expected to dictate the game with his boot and tactical control. O'Driscoll had a different mission. He wanted to break the rhythm before England could settle. Time after time, he found a way. Whether it was a perfectly timed line break, a clever offload, or simply identifying a weakness that others had missed, O'Driscoll had an extraordinary ability to change momentum in a matter of seconds. Matches that seemed comfortably under England's control suddenly became tense, chaotic, and unpredictable. That forced Wilkinson into unfamiliar territory. He was at his best when England could build pressure through structure and territory. O'Driscoll refused to let games stay predictable. His creativity demanded immediate answers, pushing Wilkinson to chase matches instead of controlling them. Every unexpected attack meant another difficult decision. Should England stay patient or force something that was not there? The pressure was relentless. Supporters expected Wilkinson to produce another moment of brilliance every time Ireland threatened. Newspapers measured every encounter between the two stars, turning individual battles into national talking points. Even when Wilkinson played well, O'Driscoll had a habit of producing one decisive moment that stole the headlines. Perhaps that was the most frustrating part. You could prepare for Brian O'Driscoll all week, study his habits, analyze the tape, build an entire defensive strategy around him. Then he would create something nobody had anticipated. That was the gift of truly great players. They forced even the best opponents to play on their terms. Some rivals don't overpower you. They outthink you, and that can be even harder to accept. Number 1. Coach Clive Woodward. The man who pushed Jonny Wilkinson harder than anyone else was never an opponent. He stood on England's sideline. Clive Woodward saw something extraordinary long before the rest of the rugby world did. While others admired Wilkinson's talent, Woodward saw an obsession with improvement that could transform England into world champions. He trusted his young fly-half with the responsibility of carrying an entire nation's expectations, and from that moment, there was no turning back. It sounded like the greatest vote of confidence a player could receive. In reality, it became an enormous burden. Woodward demanded excellence in every detail. England's training camps were built around relentless preparation, analysis, and repetition. Every kick mattered. Every tactical decision was examined. Every mistake was discussed. Good performances were expected. Great performances quickly became the new standard. For Wilkinson, whose own perfectionism already bordered on relentless self-criticism, that environment became both a blessing and a prison. He was never simply trying to win. He was trying to play the perfect match. If England won but he missed a tackle, he remembered the tackle. If he kicked every goal but one, he remembered the one. The expectations surrounding him grew larger after every victory, until they became impossible for any player to escape. Then came 2003. The drop goal against Australia turned Jonny Wilkinson into a sporting immortal. Around the world, people saw the celebration. They saw the trophy. They saw history. Very few saw what came afterward. The injuries. The endless rehabilitation. The pressure to become the same player again. Every comeback carried the question of whether he could ever reach the standard that had been created under Woodward's England. That expectation followed him for years. Clive Woodward never intended to become a source of pain in Wilkinson's career. On the contrary, he helped shape one of rugby's greatest players. But greatness always comes with a price, and no one demanded more from Jonny Wilkinson than the coach who believed he could become the best in the world. The heaviest scars are not always left by your enemies. Sometimes they come from the people who believed in you the most. When people remember Jonny Wilkinson, they usually remember a single kick. The drop goal in Sydney. The raised arms. The roar of an entire nation. It is one of the greatest moments in rugby history, and it deserves every bit of its legendary status. But no great career is built on one moment. It is built on every difficult day that comes before it. the rivals who refused to back down, the teammates who demanded more than seemed possible, the coach who believed excellence was never enough if perfection was still within reach. Each of them left something behind. Some left bruises. Some left doubt. Some left memories that never completely faded. Together, they shaped the player Jonny Wilkinson eventually became. What made Wilkinson different was never his kicking technique or his famous pre-kick routine. It was his willingness to keep going even when the pressure became almost unbearable. Every setback became another reason to work harder. Every defeat became another lesson. Every criticism became another challenge he refused to ignore. That is why his story continues to resonate with rugby supporters around the world. Not because he never struggled, but because everyone saw how much those struggles cost him. The quiet determination, the endless preparation, the sacrifices hidden behind every successful performance. They turned an extraordinary player into a lasting symbol of resilience. Looking back now, it is easy to celebrate the victories. It is much harder to appreciate the battles that made those victories possible. The names on this list were never just opponents or colleagues. They were the people who tested Jonny Wilkinson at every stage of his career, forcing him to become stronger, tougher, and more resilient than he ever imagined. Without those battles, there would have been no legend. Without those scars, there would have been no World Cup hero. In the end, legends are not remembered because life was easy. They are remembered because they kept standing after every collision, and that is why Jonny Wilkinson's story will never be forgotten.